The rain-slick streets of Seattle gleamed under the sodium lamps like veins of forgotten promises, and Riley Everett had never felt more exposed than in that moment. Her fingers laced tentatively with June's in the fluorescent harshness of the evergreen retail superstore. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" The clerk's voice sliced through the hum of shopping carts, sharp as a winter gale off Puget Sound, drawing stares from the evening crowd like moths to a cruel flame. Riley's heart plummeted, the simple act of holding her date's hand warm, tentative, a bridge across years of solitude, reduced to something sordid, something to be spat upon in the aisle of canned goods and discount linens. June pulled away first, her cheeks flushing crimson, but Riley stood frozen, the weight of the clerk's glare pinning her like a specimen under glass. The woman behind the counter, mid-40s with a name tag reading Marge in chipped plastic, leaned forward, her lips curling in disdain that carried the bitter edge of small-town sermons Riley thought she'd escaped long ago. "This ain't that kind of place, sweetheart. Keep your affections for the parking lot." Laughter rippled from a nearby family, a child's wide eyes mirroring the innocence Riley had once clung to. Back when Montana's endless skies hid her first fumbling kisses behind hay bales and whispered fears. She wanted to vanish into the linoleum, to rewind the evening's fragile hope, their shared laughter over Thai takeout, June's shy admission of painting watercolors on rainy afternoons, but the humiliation rooted her there, a thorn in the soft underbelly of her carefully guarded life. Riley murmured an apology that tasted like ash, tugging June toward the exit as the rain outside intensified, drumming against the glass doors like accusations. In the car, the silence stretched taut, broken only by June's soft, "I'm sorry," as if she carried the blame for Riley's unraveling world. But it wasn't June's fault, it never was. Riley drove home through sheets of water that blurred the city lights into halos of regret, her mind replaying the scene in relentless loops. She'd built evergreen retail from nothing, a faceless empire of warehouses and storefronts sprawling across the West Coast. Yet here she was, anonymous in her own domain, stripped bare by a single glance of judgment. The secret ownership, tucked away in layers of trusts and proxies to shield her from the scrutiny she'd fled after her father's death, felt like a hollow armor now. What good was power if it couldn't shield the simplest touch? By the time she reached her apartment overlooking Lake Union, the downpour had softened to a persistent drizzle, mirroring the quiet erosion inside her. June lingered at the door, her dark curls frizzing in the damp air, but Riley waved her off with a forced smile. "Call you tomorrow?" June asked, her voice laced with the uncertainty of new beginnings. Riley nodded, but as the door clicked shut, she slid down against it, knees to chest, the echo of Marge's words carving deeper than any Montana blizzard. She'd come out late at 28, after burying her mother and selling the family ranch, trading isolation for the anonymity of corporate shadows. Dates had been fleeting, coffee here, a walk there, but none had ignited like June, with her easy laugh and the way her fingers traced patterns on Riley's palm like mapping constellations. And now one bigoted encounter had snuffed it out, or so it seemed. Sleep evaded her that night, the city's hum filtering through the blinds like distant thunder. Riley paced the hardwood floors, worn smooth by years of solitary footsteps, her reflection in the window a ghost of the woman who'd once dreamed of open ranges and unjudged horizons. Evergreen wasn't just a company. It was her redemption, born from the ruins of a childhood where her father's stern silences masked his own unspoken pains, and her mother's gentle hymns offered no map for the desires Riley harbored in secret. She'd poured her inheritance into it, expanding from a single Montana outlet to a chain that employed thousands, all while staying invisible. Riley Everett, the reclusive founder, known only to a handful of lawyers. It was supposed to be freedom, this hidden throne, but tonight it mocked her. A vast machine indifferent to the human heart it overlooked. Dawn crept in gray and unforgiving, painting the lake in muted silvers. Riley brewed coffee strong enough to scour the bitterness from her throat, scrolling through her phone for distractions. News of wildfires scorching the Cascades, a profile on local artists that made her think of June's watercolors. But the humiliation lingered, a bruise blooming across her chest, forcing memories to surface like driftwood on the tide. At 17, she'd held hands with Clara under the stars at a county fair, only for whispers to chase them home, her father's face hardening into something unrecognizable. "Keep it buried, girl," he'd growled, and she had for years until the weight cracked her open. Coming out had been a quiet rebellion, shared with a therapist in Billings, but the world beyond therapy rooms was less forgiving, as Marge had so gleefully reminded her. Work called, pulling her into the rhythm of emails and spreadsheets from her home office, a sunlit nook overlooking the water where ferns climbed the brick walls like resilient veins. As CEO in absentia, she delegated through proxies, her days a tapestry of numbers that numbed the ache. But today the figures blurred, Marge's face superimposing over profit margins. By midday, impulse seized her. She logged into the internal HR portal, a forbidden thrill in her anonymity, searching for the shift logs from last night. There it was. Margaret Hale, employee ID 4782, assigned to Register 3. A click revealed her file: 20 years of service, commendations for efficiency, a single warning for attitude in 2019. Riley's finger hovered over the report button, rage flickering like heat lightning, but she closed the tab instead, the cursor blinking like an unanswered question. The afternoon dragged, heavy with the scent of wet earth rising from the balcony. Riley wandered down to the lakeside path, boots squelching in puddles that reflected fragmented skies. Joggers passed with earbuds in, oblivious to the storm raging beneath her skin, and she envied their forward momentum. June texted, "Missed you last night. Dinner soon?" Riley's thumbs hesitated, the warmth of those words clashing with the cold knot in her gut. She replied with a heart emoji, a small surrender. But as she walked, the encounter replayed, each detail sharpening the wound. Why did it still cut so deep? She'd faced boardroom sharks, navigated mergers that swallowed competitors whole, yet one woman's scorn reduced her to a trembling girl again. Evening fell soft, the city lights winking on like hesitant stars. Riley returned home to the quiet echo of her footsteps, pouring a glass of red wine that stained her lips like unspoken confessions. She sank into the couch, a worn leather piece salvaged from her Montana days, and let the memories flood unchecked. After Clara, there'd been silence, a decade of burying desires under work and wanderlust, drifting west to Seattle's fog-shrouded embrace, where the rain seemed to wash away the past. Evergreen had risen from that drift, a phoenix of practicality, but love? Love had remained a distant shore, glimpsed but never landed. Until June, with her artist soul and the courage Riley admired from afar. The wine warmed her veins, loosening the knots, but sleep came fitful dreams tangled with store aisles and accusing eyes. Morning brought resolve, fragile as new frost. She'd go back. Not as the owner, but as herself, Riley, the woman who'd held a hand and paid for it in shards. She dressed in jeans and a cable-knit sweater, the fabric soft against her skin like a half-remembered comfort, and drove to the store under clearing skies. The parking lot shimmered, puddles capturing clouds that promised reprieve. Inside, the aisles hummed with midday bustle, fluorescent lights buzzing like persistent doubts. Marge was there, behind the same register, her posture rigid as a sentinel. Riley's pulse thrummed, but she approached a different line, loading her basket with mundane needs: bread, milk, a bunch of dahlias whose petals evoked June's watercolors. At checkout, another clerk smiled politely, but as Riley bagged her items, she caught Marge's sidelong glance, a flicker of recognition laced with triumph. It stung, fresh as salt in a cut, but Riley met her eyes briefly, a silent challenge born of exhaustion. Outside, the dahlias trembled in her arms, their pink heads nodding in the breeze, and she wondered if forgiveness was a flower that could bloom in such barren soil. The drive home wound through neighborhoods of clapboard houses and blooming magnolias, Seattle's eclectic heart beating in tattooed arms and rainbow flags fluttering from porches. Riley pulled over at a viewpoint, the sound stretching below like a silver ribbon, fairies cutting wakes that spread and dissolve. She thought of her mother, whose Bible verses had cloaked a quiet acceptance, never voiced but felt in the extra quilt on Riley's bed during harsh winters. "Life's a mending, child," she'd say, needle flashing in lamplight. Was this the tear to mend? Or the one that would unravel everything? Back in her apartment, the flowers found a vase on the windowsill, their scent mingling with the lake's briny whisper. Riley called June, voice steady despite the tremor beneath. "Dinner tonight? My place." June's laugh was sunlight breaking clouds, and for a moment, the wound dulled to a throb. But as she prepared, chopping vegetables with rhythmic precision, the knife's edge a metaphor for precision she'd lost. Doubt crept in. What if the humiliation had poisoned the well? What if every touch now carried the ghost of Marge's scorn? June arrived at dusk, bearing a bottle of Pinot and a sketchpad tucked under her arm, her presence filling the space like warm ink on parchment. They cooked together, hands brushing in the steam of sizzling garlic, laughter easing the tension coiled in Riley's shoulders. Over plates of pasta laced with basil from the balcony pots, June shared stories of her gallery showings, her voice painting pictures of vibrant canvases that captured the city's soul. Riley listened, mesmerized, but when June reached across the table, fingers seeking hers, Riley flinched, an involuntary spasm that hung between them like a dropped stitch. "I'm sorry," Riley whispered, pulling back, the words tumbling out in a rush. June's eyes, deep brown pools flecked with gold, held no judgment, only the patient depth of someone who'd navigated her own storms. "The store last night. It brought up things." The confession spilled then, fragments of Montana nights and hidden heartaches, the humiliation a catalyst cracking open the vault. June listened without interruption, her hand resting palm up on the table, an invitation rather than a demand. When Riley finished, tears tracing silent paths down her cheeks, June rose and knelt beside her, enveloping her in an embrace that smelled of lavender and fresh paper. "It's not your shame to carry," June murmured, her breath warm against Riley's temple. They stayed like that until the candles guttered low, the lake outside a mirror to the moon's quiet glow. That night June slept over, their bodies curled together on the couch under a throw blanket woven with threads of shared vulnerability. No grand gestures, just the steady rhythm of breathing in sync, a tentative mending. But dawn brought clarity's edge. Riley couldn't rebuild on ruins alone. The company loomed in her mind, a tool for justice or mercy, and as June stirred beside her, Riley vowed to wield it not in vengeance, but in the slow redemptive light of understanding. The days blurred into a haze of routine laced with undercurrents of fragility, Seattle's perpetual mist weaving through Riley's thoughts like threads of unresolved melody. Work demanded her focus, virtual meetings from the sun-dappled office, where spreadsheets unfolded like maps to distant stability. But Marge's face haunted the margins, a specter in the columns of employee metrics. Riley resisted delving deeper into the HR files, fearing the pull of power would eclipse the raw honesty June had coaxed from her. Instead, she poured energy into small acts. Walks along the Burke-Gilman Trail, where blackberries tangled the fences like nature's defiant graffiti, and evenings sketching with June, her own lines hesitant but alive on the page. Yet the breakdown simmered unspoken, a pressure building beneath the surface calm. It erupted on a Thursday, gray skies pressing low over the Olympics visible from her balcony, when a routine email from her proxy CEO referenced upcoming diversity training for the chain. Mandatory for all staff. It read, crisp and corporate, but to Riley it landed like an indictment, stirring the pot of her suppressed fury. She stormed the kitchen, slamming cabinets in search of tea that wouldn't soothe, the clatter echoing her inner tumult. June, arriving unannounced with pastries from a Capitol Hill bakery, found her slumped at the table, fists clenched around a mug gone cold. "Riley." June's voice was soft, probing, but the dam broke without warning. Words poured forth in a torrent, accusations against a world that still wielded judgment like a blunt instrument, the sting of Marge's dismissal replaying as if etched in vinyl grooves. "I own it, June. The whole damn thing. And I did nothing." The admission hung heavy, the secret spilling like ink across fresh linen, staining the air between them. June slid into the chair opposite, her hand covering Riley's, steady as an anchor in choppy waters. Owning it meant everything and nothing, Riley realized in that unraveling moment. Evergreen Retail had been her fortress, built brick by ledger from the ashes of her family's collapse. Father's gambling debt swallowing the ranch, mother's quiet decline into silence after his suicide. At 22, she'd clawed her way through community college night classes, waitressing by day, her queerness a shadow she kept leashed until it nearly choked her. The first store, a modest outpost in Missoula, had been a gamble on normalcy, shelves stocked with the everyday illusions she'd craved. Success followed, exponential and impersonal, allowing her to vanish behind veils of incorporation, her name a whisper in board minutes. But power, unexercised in personal realms, curdled into this paralysis in the face of prejudice. June listened through the sobs that racked Riley's frame, her own eyes glistening with empathetic tears. "You're not nothing," she said when the storm subsided, thumb tracing circles on Riley's wrist. "You're the woman who built something from heartbreak. That's not paralysis, that's survival." They spent the afternoon in hushed communion, June reading aloud from a dog-eared copy of The Night Circus, her voice weaving magic into the mundane, while Riley leaned against her, the weight lifting incrementally, like fog burning off a hillside. But solitude reclaimed her that evening, June heading to a late shift at the gallery, leaving Riley to the apartment's echoing quiet. She wandered to the window, the lake a dark expanse dotted with sailboat lights, each one a beacon of lives unburdened by her particular ghosts. The breakdown deepened, a chasm widening as memories resurfaced unbidden. The ranch house's creaking porch where she'd first felt the stirrings of desire for a neighbor girl, innocent as wildflowers, crushed under her father's disapproving gaze. "Men provide," he'd barked during one of his rages, whiskey on his breath, oblivious to the boy he'd never been. Riley had internalized it, building walls thicker than the Rockies, only to find them crumbling in a fluorescent-lit aisle. Impulse drove her to the computer, fingers flying across keys to pull up Marge's full profile. Margaret Hale, born in Tacoma, widowed young, 2 grown sons in the military, 1 lost to Afghanistan, the file noted clinically. Commendations for long hours during expansions, but notes of friction. Resists policy changes. Verbal altercations with younger staff. Riley's anger softened at the edges, humanizing the villain, but the softening terrified her. Forgiveness felt like betrayal of her own pain. She closed the laptop, retreating to the balcony where wind off the water carried the faint cry of gulls, their calls a lament for what couldn't be unsaid. Nights blurred into insomniac vigils, the city below a tapestry of neon veins pulsing with lives Riley envied for their simplicity. She avoided the superstore, opting for corner markets where clerks nodded without seeing, but the avoidance amplified the isolation, turning her sanctuary into a cage. June sensed it, their dates shifting to quieter venues, picnics in Discovery Park, where salal berries stained their fingers purple, and whispered confessions under madrona trees whose bark peeled like old wounds. "Tell me what you need," June urged one sunset, her head on Riley's lap, hair spilling like autumn leaves. "I need to not break," Riley replied, voice cracking, and in that admission, the fracture lines spiderwebbed further. She quit sketching, the pencils gathering dust beside June's vibrant supplies, her hands trembling with the effort to hold steady. Work suffered too. A merger proposal sat untouched, emails piling like autumn leaves. The proxy CEO's follow-up, "All okay," pricked her conscience, a reminder of the empire teetering on her distraction. The nadir came on a rain-lashed Sunday, the kind where Seattle's skies wept without cease. Riley drove aimlessly, tires hissing on wet asphalt, until she found herself at the ranch's echo. A vast open space north of the city, fields rolling under bruised clouds much like Montana's. She parked at the edge, boots sinking into mud that clung like regret, and screamed into the wind, the sound swallowed by gusts that bent the grasses low. Tears mixed with rain, her body folding to the earth, the breakdown complete. A woman undone by a touch denied, her power a phantom limb aching for purpose. June found her there hours later, alerted by a frantic voicemail left mid-sob. She arrived in her battered Subaru, wipers slashing the deluge, and without words pulled Riley into the car, wrapping her in a blanket from the trunk that smelled of oil paints and home. They drove in silence to a nearby diner, neon sign flickering open like a hesitant welcome, where pie steam rose between them, sweet and unearned. "You're allowed to fall," June said, fork pausing midair. "But don't forget you can rise too." Riley nodded, the words a lifeline tossed into the abyss, and for the first time since the store, she felt the edges of the chasm recede, if only by inches. Recovery's first tendrils appeared in the days that followed, tentative as crocuses pushing through snow. Riley returned to her sketches, lines bolder now, capturing the diner's chrome curves and June's profile etched in graphite softness. Work resumed, the merger inked with renewed vigor, her proxy none the wiser to the storm weathered in private. But the encounter with Marge lingered, a shadow at the periphery, demanding confrontation before healing could take root. One evening as they walked the waterfront, fairies hooting in the distance, Riley voiced it aloud. "I have to go back. Face it." June squeezed her hand, the gesture simple and profound. "Then we'll go together." The promise steadied her, a bridge over the widening gap, and as stars pricked the clearing sky, Riley glimpsed the arc of her unraveling. Not an end, but a pivot toward something uncharted, where breakdown might forge the stronger self. Yet doubt not in the quiet hours, the apartment's walls closing in with whispers of failure. She pored over company policies late into nights, highlighting clauses on inclusivity that rang hollow against her experience. Marge's file reopened, pages scanned for clues to the woman's armor. Photos from staff events showing a stiff smile, arms crossed like barriers. Empathy warred with resentment, an internal tide pulling Riley toward understanding she wasn't ready to claim. June's presence anchored her, their nights a ritual of shared silences and gentle touches, bodies aligning like puzzle pieces long separated. The breakdown had stripped her bare, exposing the girl from the ranch who dreamed of skies without judgment. Now in its wake Riley stood at the precipice, the city sprawling below like a canvas awaiting her mark. The final word she knew lay not in retribution, but in the quiet reclamation of her voice, whispered first to June, then perhaps to the world beyond. Autumn deepened its hold on Seattle, leaves carpeting the sidewalks in russet and gold, crunching underfoot like fragile resolutions. Riley's resolve to return to the store solidified over shared breakfasts with June, where maple syrup pooled like amber promises on their plates. But life, with its capricious currents, intervened before confrontation could bloom. It began on a crisp Saturday, the air sharp with the scent of wood smoke from distant hearths, when June suggested a detour to the Pike Place market, stalls brimming with artisans and the earthy tang of fresh salmon, a balm for Riley's lingering unease. They wandered hand in hand, the crowd's bustle a gentle buffer against vulnerability, June's enthusiasm drawing Riley into stalls of hand-thrown pottery and woven scarves that evoked Montana's woolen winters. At a jeweler's booth where silver rings glinted like captured moonlight, their eyes met over a delicate band etched with fern motifs, subtle, enduring. "For luck," June murmured, slipping it onto Riley's finger, the metal cool then warming to her skin. Laughter bubbled up, light as the market's fountain spray, and for an afternoon, the shadow of Marge receded, chased by the simple joy of presence. But encounters like the city's sudden rains arrive unannounced. As they paused at a flower stand, dahlias nodding in buckets like echoes of Riley's vase at home, a voice cut through the din, familiar, edged with weariness. "Need help finding something?" Riley turned, heart stuttering, to face not Marge, but a woman in her late 30s, apron dusted with pollen, her smile tentative beneath cropped auburn hair and eyes the color of storm-tossed waves. Harper Voss, the name tag read, and something in her posture, open yet guarded, stirred a curiosity that overrode flight. June sensed the shift, her thumb brushing Riley's knuckles in quiet query, but Riley stepped forward, drawn by an inexplicable pull. "Just browsing," she replied, voice steadier than expected, selecting a bundle of lavender whose scent evoked June's soap. Harper's fingers brushed hers in the exchange, a spark not of static but recognition, though neither could name it. "These hold their color well," Harper offered, her tone carrying the lilt of the Pacific Northwest, vowels rounded like smoothed pebbles. "Like memories you want to keep." The words landed soft, disarming, and Riley lingered, questions forming unbidden. "You work here often?" Harper nodded, gesturing to the stall she'd tended since summer, a side gig supplementing her role as a park ranger in the Olympics. Stories of mapping trails and rescuing lost hikers spilling forth with easy warmth. June joined seamlessly, her artist's eye admiring Harper's sketches pinned to the booth's frame. Charcoal renderings of fog-shrouded peaks and tide pools teeming with secrets. The conversation flowed, meandering like the market's alleys, from the resilience of native plants to the quiet rebellions of choosing solitude over convention. By the time they parted, numbers exchanged under the guise of trail recommendations. "In case you need a guide," Harper said with a wink that crinkled her freckled nose. Riley felt a shift, subtle as the tide's turn. Driving home through streets lined with maples aflame, June teased gently, She seemed nice. A bit intense, though. Riley laughed, but the encounter replayed. Harper's laugh, low and resonant, echoing the wind through evergreens, her gaze direct yet kind, holding space without demand. It wasn't attraction, not yet. Just a mirror to the woman Riley aspired to be, unbowed by scars. The following week unfolded in layers of discovery, Harper's texts arriving like unexpected wildflowers. A photo of a bioluminescent bayou at dusk, caption light in the dark, or a query about June's watercolors that bridged their worlds. Riley found herself responding with fragments of her own. Sunsets over Lake Union. The ranch's ghost haunting her dreams. Guarded but genuine. June encouraged it, her own affections unwavering. Yet Riley sensed the undercurrent. A triangle forming not of rivalry but resonance. 3 women orbiting a shared hunger for authenticity. One evening, as rain pattered against the gallery windows where June's exhibit hung, canvases alive with Seattle's moody palettes, Harper appeared, uninvited but welcome, her ranger uniform traded for jeans and a flannel that hugged her athletic frame. "Saw the listing online," she explained, eyes tracing a piece depicting intertwined roots breaking stone. "Reminds me of avalanches, how pressure births something new." The word struck Riley, who stood nearby nursing a plastic cup of Chardonnay, the metaphor mirroring her stalled confrontation with the store. They talked until closing, the 3 of them clustered by the door, laughter mingling with the scent of oil paint and wet pavement. Harper's stories wove through the night. Orphaned young in Portland's rainy suburbs, raised by a grandmother who taught her the language of ferns and the folly of hiding one's path. She said love's like a river. Bends but never breaks if you follow the flow. Riley absorbed it, her own river, turbulent with evergreen secrets and Marge's echo, feeling less damned. June watched with quiet approval, her hand slipping into Riley's, a triad of support rather than strain. As autumn waned, their meetings multiplied. A hike in the Issaquah Alps, where mist clung to cedars like veils lifted slowly, Harper leading with sure-footed grace, pointing out salal berries sweet as first truths. Riley shared snippets of her corporate veil, the weight of anonymity lightening with each step, while June captured the scene in quick sketches, her lines capturing the interplay of light through leaves. Bonds formed in these interstices, Harper's quiet strength complementing June's creative fire, Riley the steady current between, her wounds airing in the open air. Yet the encounter with Harper wasn't mere diversion. It illuminated paths Riley hadn't charted. One fog-bound morning, over coffee at a Queen Anne cafe where steam curled like unspoken desires, Harper confessed her own guarded heart. "Dated a woman once in college. Ended because I couldn't shout it from the rooftops. Regrets a heavy pack on the trail." Her vulnerability cracked something in Riley, the shared terrain of hesitation forging a deeper alliance. June, arriving late with sketchpad in tow, joined them, her presence weaving the moment tighter, 3 threads braiding into resilience. The city's pulse quickened toward holidays, strings of lights threading evergreens like veins of hope, and Riley's resolve resurfaced, tempered by these new connections. She confided in Harper during a waterfront stroll, gulls wheeling overhead, the store incident spilling forth in halting breaths. Harper listened, her silence a meadow for Riley's words, then offered. "Confrontations like facing a bear, slow eyes steady, no sudden moves. But you've got the strength." The advice lingered, a compass in the fog. As winter's chill nipped the air, their trio solidified. Dinners in Riley's apartment, where laughter echoed off Lakeview windows, and quiet nights trading books. Willa Cather for Harper, Virginia Woolf for June, Riley bridging with Joan Didion's sharp truths. Attraction simmered beneath, undefined. Glances lingering on Harper's capable hands, June's knowing smiles, but it fueled rather than fractured, a collective thawing. The pivotal meeting came unbidden. On a December eve when snow dusted the city rare and fleeting, Harper invited them to her cabin on the Sammamish River. A modest A-frame nestled among alders, wood smoke curling from the chimney like an invitation to warmth. Inside, the space breathed simplicity. Shelves of field guides, a stone hearth crackling, quilts pieced from faded flannels. Over stew simmered with rosemary from the windowsill garden, stories deepened. Harper's grandmother's tales of women who loved fiercely in shadowed hollows, June's childhood in Eugene's artist communes, Riley's ranch silences broken only by wind through wheat. As night deepened, stars pricking the velvet sky visible through frost-laced panes, vulnerability crested. Riley spoke of Marge again, the humiliation scar tissue pulling taut. Harper leaned forward, firelight gilding her features. Sometimes the final word isn't yours alone. It's in showing them the light they can't see. June nodded, her hand finding Riley's, Harper's joining on the other side. A circle unbroken. In that hearthglow moment, the encounter transcended chance. It was the universe's quiet orchestration, three souls converging to mend what isolation had frayed. Riley slept that night on the cabin's loft couch, June and Harper below. The river's murmur a lullaby of possibility. Dawn brought clarity. The store awaited, but now she approached not solitary, but held by hands that knew the terrain of fear and grace. Winter wrapped Seattle in its crystalline hush, the sound frozen in places like a held breath, and Riley's path to the store crystallized in the shared resolve of her newfound circle. Harper and June flanked her on the evening chosen. A Tuesday mid-January, when the superstore's lights burned steady against the early dark, promising confrontation without the chaos of crowds. They parked in the lot's far reaches, tires crunching over residual ice, the air crisp with the promise of resolution. Riley's pulse echoed the distant traffic hum, but their presence, June's gloved hand in hers, Harper's steady gaze in the rearview, steadied the tremor. Inside, the aisle stretched fluorescent and familiar, canned soup stacked like unspoken apologies. Marge manned register 4, her movements mechanical, graying bun unyielding as doctrine. Riley approached alone, basket empty save for a single apple, crisp red as raw honesty, her companions lingering by magazines, sentinels in the wings. "Evening," Riley said, voice even, placing the fruit on the conveyor. Marge's eyes flicked up, recognition dawning slow then sharp, her lips thinning to a line. "You again." The words landed flat, devoid of the prior venom, but laced with wariness. Riley met her gaze, the apple rolling gently between them like a shared secret. "Yes. Last time you saw something you didn't like. I came to talk about it." Marge's scanner beeped, bagging the fruit with deliberate slowness, her knuckles whitening on the handle. Shoppers passed oblivious, their carts a river around the island of tension. "Not here," Marge muttered, glancing at the manager's office door. A jar with yellow light spilling like hesitant dawn. They moved there at her nod, the space cramped with file cabinets and the faint scent of stale coffee. A folding chair offered grudgingly. Riley sat spine straight as a trail marker, while Marge leaned against the desk, arms crossed like brambles. "What do you want? A complaint? I got a family to feed." Understanding dawned not in anger's blaze but empathy's quiet glow. Riley's words measured. "I want to know why." The hand-holding. It wasn't hurting anyone. Marge's face crumpled briefly, then hardened but cracks showed. Eyes darting to a framed photo on the desk. Two sons in dress blues, smiles frozen in youth. "World's changing too fast," she said, voice rough as unsanded wood. "Lost my boy overseas, then my husband to the bottle. Church says. Well, it says hold to what's right. You're kind. It's just more chaos." The confession hung, raw and unpolished, and Riley leaned in. Not with judgment but the bridge of shared loss. "I lost my dad young too. Suicide after debt swallowed our home. Church didn't save him. Neither did hiding who I am." Marge's breath hitched, the brambles parting slightly, and in that sliver, Riley glimpsed the woman beneath. Margaret Hale, not villain but vessel of grief, her bigotry a shield forged in fire. Forgiveness stirred, not absolution but acknowledgement. A hand extended across the chasm. Outside, June and Harper waited, their nods a silent affirmation as Riley emerged, the apple now bitten, juice lingering sweet on her tongue. Over late-night tea at a 24-hour diner, neon buzzing overhead, she recounted it all, voices overlapping in the vinyl booth like harmonies resolving. Harper traced patterns on the formica, her ranger's insight cutting clear. "Grief twists us all. She needs time like a trail healing after fire." June sketched idly, ferns uncurling on napkin edges, her empathy weaving the threads tighter. The understanding deepened their bond, transforming the trio into a deliberate weave. Weekends stretched into explorations, cross-country skis in the Methow Valley, where snow muffled doubts and Harper's laughter rang like bells on powder. Gallery crawls in Pioneer Square, June's hand guiding Riley's through shadowed lofts alive with color. Conversations turned introspective, fireside in Harper's cabin or Riley's Lakeview perch unpacking layers. Harper's college love lost to silence, a poet who fled to New York, June's fractured family, mending through art's forgiving lens. Riley's evergreen empire, the secret spilling fully now, met not with awe but alliance. "You're not alone in it anymore," June whispered one night, as they lay tangled in Riley's bed. Harper dozing on the adjacent couch after a wine-fueled debate on resilience in nature. The words sealed a pact, forgiveness extending inward. Riley absolving her younger self for the years buried, the power hoarded like a miser's coin. She began small acts within the company. Anonymous suggestions to the proxy for enhanced training modules. Not punitive but narrative-driven, stories of lives like Marge's intersecting with those like her own. Marge's thaw came gradual. A follow-up note slipped under the manager's door at Riley's urging. A simple card with resources for grief support, no signature, just light after loss. Weeks later at the store for milk and bread, Marge's scan paused, her eyes softer. "Saw your friends. Nice." It wasn't apology but overture, and Riley nodded, the apple in her basket a talisman of progress. Forgiveness, she learned, was iterative, a path marked by milestones rather than destinations. As spring hinted at the edges, crocuses piercing the chill soil, their love blossomed multifaceted, boundaries blurring into fluid grace. A kiss shared first with June under blooming cherry trees in the U District, petals drifting like confetti of renewal. Then with Harper by the river, water murmuring approvals, her lips tasting of wild mint foraged that morn. Riley navigated it with care, hearts consulted in candlelit councils, jealousy yielding to abundance. "We're rewriting the rules," Harper said, her hand spanning both theirs across a picnic blanket strewn with trail mix and truths. Evergreen's tendrils reached further, Riley's influence subtle. Policy tweaks for inclusive hiring, partnerships with local LGBTQ shelters, each memo drafted in the quiet hours, her ownership still veiled but purposeful. Marge attended a session, word filtering back through HR whispers, her feedback terse but present. "Makes you think." Understanding ripened, forgiveness its fruit, and Riley felt the scars fade. Not erased but honored, like rivers carving canyons into beauty. One equinox eve they gathered at the cabin, equilateral in flannel and firelight, toasting with cider spiced with cinnamon stars. Stories circled. Marge's tentative email to a son, bridging years of distance. Riley's decision to reveal her role, not for glory but guidance, the proxy briefed in a dawn call. Laughter wove with tears, the room a cocoon of candor. As night deepened, bodies entwined in innocent repose, limbs a map of trust, Riley whispered into the dark. "This is the understanding I craved." Spring unfurled fully then, dogwoods blushing pink along the waterfront, and their journey mirrored it. Forgiveness not a singular act but a season, nurturing growth in soil once barren. Marge's next shift brought a quiet welcome back. Her smile tentative as new leaves, and Riley returned it, the circle widening. In Harper's steady stride, June's artistic gaze, Riley found mirrors to her mending self. Love the solvent dissolving old adhesions. The final threads of understanding knotted during a storm-swept hike, thunder rolling distant over the Cascades, rain sluicing paths into rivulets of release. Slipping on moss-slick rocks, Harper caught Riley, their eyes locking in the downpour, gratitude blooming into something profound. June, ahead, turned back with open arms, the three collapsing in shared shelter under a hemlock's vast canopy, breath sinking with the drop's rhythm. "We've got you," they chorused, and in that drenched embrace, forgiveness crested, washing clean the slate for what bloomed beyond. Spring's thaw extended into Riley's core, the ice of isolation melting under the sun of collective grace, revealing bedrock strong and unyielding. With understanding as foundation, rebirth emerged not as spectacle but subtle emergence, like salmon navigating upstream after winter's dormancy. Riley stepped fully into her role at Evergreen, shedding the proxy's veil in a measured board call. Her voice, once a whisper in memos, now resonant, outlining visions of a company not just profitable but principled. "We're in the business of lives," she declared, the line drawn from her own ledger of losses, met with nods that ripened into action plans. The changes rippled outward. Training expanded to include personal testimonies, Marge volunteering haltingly for a panel, her story of loss framing prejudice as a flawed armor rather than inherent malice. Riley attended incognito, seated in the back row of the corporate auditorium overlooking Elliott Bay. The ferry's wake's a metaphor for progress's patient course. Marge's words faltered then steadied. I saw threats where there were just folks trying to hold on. And applause followed, soft but sincere, Riley's throat tight with the alchemy of redemption. Personally, rebirth wove through the trio's evolving tapestry. They claimed a shared rhythm. Mornings with Harper's Ranger shifts yielding to trail runs where Riley's lungs burned clean. Afternoons in June's studio, hands flecked with cerulean and sienna, as she learned to layer vulnerability onto canvas. Evenings converged at the apartment or cabin, meals crafted from foraged finds, nettles sautéed with garlic, salmon smoked over alder. Each bite a sacrament of sustenance. Love manifested in multiplicities. June's poetry scrawled on postcards left in coat pockets, Harper's carved pendants of western red cedar hanging warm against skin, Riley's quiet orchestrations of surprise getaways, a weekend in the San Juans, where orcas surfaced like affirmations from the deep. Challenges arose as rebirth demands tempering. A board member balked at the inclusivity initiatives, citing costs in an email terse as barbed wire, forcing Riley to navigate the corporate wilds with Harper's strategic calm and June's intuitive flair. They brainstormed over maps spread on the cabin floor, pins marking outlooks, laughter diffusing tension until resolve hardened. Riley's response, data-backed, narrative-infused, prevailed, the holdout converting after a site visit to a revamped store where rainbow pins adorned name tags without fanfare. Intimacy deepened in these fires, boundaries honored yet fluid. A night in the San Juans, bioluminescence painting the bay in ethereal blues, saw them wade barefoot into shallows, hands linked as glowing trails followed their steps. Magic manifesting the inner luminescence they'd cultivated. Kisses exchanged under stars uncountable, tender explorations mapping familiar yet ever-new terrains, always returning to the circle's core. Consent whispered, joys amplified in threefold echo. Marge's arc intertwined, a subplot of quiet triumph. Riley extended an olive branch, a coffee invitation post-panel, accepted with wary grace at a harborside cafe where gulls bartered crumbs for stares. Over lattes frothed with care, barriers eroded further. Marge sharing tales of her widowhood's hollows, Riley countering with ranch vignettes, the ranch's sale funding evergreen seed. Never thought I'd owe a well you, Marge admitted, stirring sugar in spirals, and Riley smiled, the word unspoken but felt, ally. Rebirth touched the company's veins too. Partnerships with queer-owned farms for organic lines, scholarships for LGBTQ youth in Montana's rural folds, Riley's anonymous endowments channeling her roots' redemption. Staff stories filtered back. A trans barista promoted, pride flags subtle in window displays come June. Harper joined a corporate wellness hike, her expertise infusing team building with Earth's wisdom, while June's murals graced break rooms, colors evoking hope's spectrum. Yet Rebirth's forge included reckonings. Riley revisited Montana in May, the plains greening under tentative suns, the old ranch site now a co-op farm tended by women like her, fierce, unapologetic. She walked the fence lines alone first, ghosts of father and mother stirring in the wind-whipped grasses, tears salting the earth she'd once fled. June and Harper joined at dusk, their presence a balm. They planted saplings, Douglas firs for endurance, roots delving deep as Riley's healing. You're home now, Harper murmured, soil caking their knees, and in that fertile moment, Riley claimed it. Rebirth not erasure but reclamation. Back in Seattle, the trio formalized their haven. A lease on a Fremont house with lake glimpses through backyard alders, rooms divided yet open. June's studio awash in north light, Harper's gear nook smelling of pine resin, Riley's office a nexus of ledgers and love notes. Moving day dissolved into chaos joyful. Boxes labeled with inside jests, pizza devoured on bare floors, dances to scratchy records under paper lanterns strung like fireflies. Evergreen's annual report gleamed with metrics of growth, but Riley prized the qualitative. Emails from employees like Marge, "Thanks for seeing me." Her tag now bearing a small fern pin, nod to Harper's influence. The company, once shadow, became conduit for light donations to trail preservation. Aligning commerce with conservation, Riley's vision bridging boardrooms and backwoods. Intimate milestones marked the season's turn. A solstice gathering with friends, the house alive with strings of lights and stories swapped like heirlooms. Harper's proposal for a joint art trail exhibit, June's illustrations paired with Riley's essays on resilience's landscapes. Love's expressions evolved. Mornings tangled in sheets sun-dappled, afternoons of shared labors, evenings of quiet perusals where books bridged silences into depths. A minor setback tested the alloy. A media leak hinting at Riley's ownership, tabloid whispers twisting her queerness into scandal fodder. Phones buzzed with concern, but the trio circled wagons, Harper's offline retreat to the woods, June's defiant social posts of their hands intertwined, Riley's press release owning it all. Evergreen thrives because of diverse hearts. The storm passed, coverage shifting to admiration, the company's stock a quiet uptick. By summer's cusp, rebirth stood manifest. Riley, once fractured, now whole, running marathons along the waterfront, lungs full of salt air and certainty. Painting her first solo canvas, strokes bold as declarations. Leading hikes where she shared not just paths but parables of perseverance. Marge attended a housewarming, bearing pie crusty with apples from her backyard tree, conversation flowing easier than cider at harvest. The house became hearth, walls echoing with laughter's legacy, garden plots yielding tomatoes red as courage. In quiet moments, dawn yoga on the deck, sunset sails on the lake. Riley marveled at the woman reborn. Not flawless but fortified, loved the forge and fellowship the flame. Summer crowned Seattle in languid gold, the sun lingering late over rooftops like a benediction long deferred. And in its warmth, Riley's light fully kindled, casting rays that touched all she'd mended and made. The house in Fremont pulsed with life's easy cadence, windows flung wide to admit the hum of bees in the garden, where sunflowers bowed heavy-headed to the trio's tending hands. Evergreen retail, once a bastion of her hidden labors, now shone as beacon. Annual inclusivity summits drawing crowds to the flagship store's rooftop, overlooking the sound where dolphins arced like joyful punctuation to speeches on shared horizons. Marge had become an unlikely fixture, her visits sporadic but sincere. Sundays for barbecues where she grilled skewers with Harper's precision, sharing war stories that bridged generations, her laughter loosening like vines claiming trellis. "Never figured I'd befriend the boss," she'd quip, plate balanced on knee, eyes crinkling at Riley's mock indignation. Forgiveness had flowered into friendship, tentative petals unfolding to reveal the woman beneath. A widow planting community gardens in Tacoma, her hands soil-stained with purpose renewed. The trio's love matured into a verdant expanse, boundaries as natural as riverbanks guiding flow. They traveled light. A road trip along the Oregon coast, Highway 101 winding through sea stacks sculpted by relentless tides, stops at tide pools where anemones waved like underwater flags of welcome. In a Cannon Beach cottage rented for a week of salt-kissed idyll, they wrote manifestos on driftwood. Embrace the current, color the unseen, root where you rise. Nights blurred into stargazing on the sand, constellations mapping futures unbound, bodies reclining in hammocks strung between pines, whispers weaving dreams into dawn. Back home, light infused the everyday. June's gallery solo show intertwined horizons, featuring triptychs of their hands, calloused, paint-flecked, ringed, drawing critics who praised the quiet revolution in relational abstraction. Harper led wilderness therapy groups for evergreen staff, her voice steady as granite outcrops, guiding urban souls through ferns to inner clearings. Riley unmasked, keynote at a Portland conference, her talk from shadows to shelves. Owning our stories rippling through retail circles, invitations flooding like summer rains. Yet light's arrival honors the dark traversed, and echoes lingered nights when old doubts surfaced like bioluminescent wakes, Riley waking sweat-damp to Montana's phantom winds. June and Harper met them with presence. A cup of chamomile steeped strong, stories retold until familiarity dulled the edge. One such eve, thunder rumbling distant over the Olympics, they gathered in the garden under string lights, fireflies winking in the alders. "The dark taught us to seek this," Harper said. passing a jar of captured glow, and Riley nodded, releasing them skyward, points of brilliance merging with stars. Community burgeoned, the house a hub. Potlucks with Marge's church friends, tentative at first, evolving into discussions where Bibles met badges of pride. Common ground in Grace's broad meadow. A young clerk from the store, coming out amid whispers, found mentorship in Riley's quiet office hours, her thanks a handmade quilt pieced from flannel scraps. Echo of her mother's craft. Autumn tinted the leaves once more, but now with hues of fulfillment. Harvest festivals where they judged pies. Marge's entry taking blue for tart cherries laced with forgiveness's tang. Evergreen's expansion included a Montana outpost. Riley cutting the ribbon under big skies. June and Harper beside. The crowd's cheers a chorus to her roots reclaimed. Full circle, she murmured, wind tugging her hair. The scar on her jaw catching light like a badge. Love's light shone intimate too. Anniversaries marked with rituals. A vow renewal on the Sammamish, words etched on bark scrolls, Harper's carvings enduring as oaths. June's commissioned portrait, the three in watercolor wash of dawn, hung above the mantel. Intimacies deepened in trust's glow. Mornings of lazy explorations, laughter punctuating sighs. Adventures in the Olympics, packs light with essentials and each other. Challenges came gentle now, weathered with wisdom. A merger snag smoothed by Harper's mediation skills. Media scrutiny met with June's narrative spin. Riley's health scare. A benign shadow on a scan, panic's brief eclipse. Drew them closer, hospital waits filled with shared playlists and stolen doses. The all-clear a celebration of crocuses planted in window boxes. Winter returned soft, snow blanketing the garden and hush, and they hosted solstice circles, candles flickering as tales of the year spun like wool on a spindle. Marge brought Yule logs carved with ferns, her sons visiting, beards trimmed and eyes open to new kinships. Light after dark indeed, the company's holiday drive aiding shelters. Riley volunteering incognito until outed by a grateful hug. As the new year dawned, crisp and pregnant with promise, Riley stood on the deck, lake steaming faintly under frost-kissed sun, June and Harper framing her like bookends of belonging. What's next? June asked, breath clouding the air. Riley smiled, the horizon endless. More light. Always more. The story didn't end triumphant but tender. A hoar-frosted branch heavy with buds waiting to burst. Doubts might whisper on windy nights, losses echo in quiet hours, but the light, forged in wound, tempered in love, endured, a steady flame against whatever shadows dared return. In their circle, Riley had found not just rebirth but radiance. A life held, hands intertwined, the final word hers in whispers of wonder.